The doctors told me I had to quit. I went down to Scripps. I was so sick. I was bleeding from about everywhere. I mean, my stomach was gone, my head was gone, my body was gone.
James Garner finally speaks up about Clint Walker, and his story starts long before Hollywood ever knew his name. Born James Scott Bumgarner on April 7, 1928 in Norman, Oklahoma, he grew up in the middle of the Great Depression, learning tough lessons way earlier than most. Those rough early years built his grind, his resilience, and a humble attitude that followed him everywhere he went. His mother, Mildred, did everything she could to raise James and his siblings after their father walked away, and that struggle shaped Garner in a major way. It taught him to understand people deeply and respect what folks go through every day. That same understanding made his characters feel real, not some stiff stereotypes, but people who felt human, relatable, and full of heart. Before he ever hit a movie set, Garner served in the United States Army during the Korean War, putting in work as a radio operator and earning the rank of corporal. That time changed him, giving him discipline, focus, and a powerful respect for the sacrifices that regular Americans make. It shaped how he carried himself and how he treated others, both on and off the screen. His military experience also boosted the way he played heroes on camera. Whether he was a lawman, a soldier, or a rebellious type, he brought a grounded, everyday strength instead of some over-the-top fantasy hero. People believed him because he played it real.
So I called the studio and I told them, of course, they immediately sued me, breach of contract. And of course, I knew they weren't going to get anywhere with that when I got doctors after doctors telling me I have to stop.
Garner's rise kicked off in the 1950s when he shifted from small parts in movies and TV to major attention with the hit series Maverick from 1957 to 1962. That show didn't just make him famous, it showed the world exactly how much star power he had. When James Garner stepped into the role of Brett Maverick, that slick, sharp-talking gambler, he didn't just play the part, he owned it. His smooth wit, perfect timing, and natural charm had viewers locked in every week. Maverick's mix of humor, brains, and that hint of troublemaker energy mirrored parts of Garner himself, a man who could stir things up but still keep a good heart shining through. The role didn't just make Garner a TV star, it proved he could carry a whole show with ease. His blend of comedy and tension was something rare back then, and audiences couldn't get enough of it. After Maverick, Garner kept stacking wins in both TV and film, but one role stood out loud and clear: his legendary run on the Rockford Files from 1974 to 1980. As private investigator Jim Rockford, Garner showed a more seasoned skill set, layering humor, street smarts, and real emotional depth into the character. Rockford wasn't some impossible tough guy, he felt real. He took hits, he got tired, he got frustrated, and he used his smarts way more than his fists. That honest approach made Rockford unforgettable. Garner's performance even earned him an Emmy, proving he could turn a character into a full-blown cultural icon while still keeping everything authentic. His movie career hit just as hard, appearing in classics like The Great Escape, 1963, Grand Prix, 1966, and Murphy's Romance, 1985. He jumped from action to romance to comedy without breaking a sweat, showing how wide his range really was. What made him stand out was his natural style, nothing fake, nothing forced. Viewers trusted him because he felt like someone they knew, not some made-up Hollywood image. That honesty didn't just win critics over, it built a loyal fan base that respected his skill, his charm, and the integrity he brought to every role he touched. Off-screen, James Garner carried himself with serious humility and steady principles, and people in the industry respected him for that. He didn't stay quiet when something was wrong. He openly challenged unfair studio treatment and pushed hard for fair contracts, becoming one of the early voices fighting for actors' rights in Hollywood. He also poured his time into charity work and veteran support, showing that the same compassion he brought to his roles was a real part of who he was. Even with all his fame, Garner stayed down to earth and easy to approach. He always talked about how family, close friends, and staying true to yourself mattered way more than money or celebrity status. His influence on entertainment runs deep because his acting style, real, calm, and sincere, changed how a lot of future performers approach their craft. He proved that you don't need wild behavior or flashy moves to win people over. Real connection hits harder than any big Hollywood performance. Many modern actors have pointed to him as a major inspiration, praising the standards he set and the unforgettable roles he left behind. His impact continues because authenticity never goes out of style, and he mastered it like few others. Garner's personal life was highlighted by his strong marriage to Lois Josephine Fleischman Clark, a love story that turned into a lifelong partnership. Their relationship started fast and intense, almost like something out of a movie. Garner met her at a party in 1956, and the spark between them was instant. He fell for her so hard that just 16 days after meeting, they were married on August 17, 1956. Thinking back on those early days, Garner once recounted, "We went to dinner every night for 14 nights. I was just absolutely nuts about her." That whirlwind beginning turned into decades of loyalty, showing just how serious he was when he cared about someone. James Garner once joked, "I spent $77 on our honeymoon and it about broke me." That little story is funny, but it also shows how simple and genuine their early life together really was. Long before he became a Hollywood favorite, Garner had this natural humor and down-to-earth vibe that always came through, even when he talked about marriage. He once compared marriage to military service, saying, "Marriage is like the army. Everyone complains, but you'd be surprised at the large number of people who re-enlist." That line carried his charm while also showing how seriously he understood the effort and commitment that keep a relationship strong. Garner's wife Lois practiced Judaism, which added another layer of culture and faith to their home life. They worked through their different traditions with respect, building a blended family that stood on understanding and support. When they married, Clark was already a mother, and her daughter was recovering from a serious illness that required a lot of care and strength. Garner stepped into that situation with patience and real heart, treating her with respect and becoming part of a supportive household without trying to force anything or take over. It showed early on how responsible and caring he really was. As time went on, Garner and Clark grew their family even more with the birth of their daughter, Greta, better known as Gigi, on January 4, 1958. Her arrival opened a whole new chapter for them, mixing the rhythm of their already established family with the excitement and challenges that come with raising a new baby, especially while Garner's career was rising fast in the public eye. Even with the attention and pressure, they kept their home grounded, proving that love, respect, and steady teamwork were the real foundation of their life together. James Garner's thoughts on fatherhood always carried that same warmth he showed in real life, stressing how much presence, steady guidance, and a bit of humor can shape young lives in a powerful way. Even with the non-stop pressure of Hollywood and the heavy workload that came with his long career, he and Lois stayed married all the way until his passing in 2014, a powerful example of what real commitment looks like. Their marriage wasn't some perfect fairy tale, though. They had two separate break periods, one that lasted 3 months in 1970 and another in 1979, but every time they found their way back to each other. They officially reunited in September 1981, 2 years after that second separation, showing that both of them were willing to rebuild, communicate, and keep pushing forward together. That kind of resilience isn't easy, especially when careers, stress, and public attention are always in the mix. Garner's ability to hold on to a long-term marriage in such a high-pressure world says a lot about his loyalty, humility, and the deep care he had for his family. He knew that long-lasting relationships take real work, patience, honesty, and the courage to face challenges as a team. These were principles he lived by and often talked about with his classic mix of wit and straight-up truth. James Garner, the actor whose charm and realness set a whole standard in Hollywood, finally opened up about what it was like working with Clint Walker. Walker's massive presence and rugged vibe made him impossible to forget, and hearing Garner speak on their time together added a whole new layer to the story of two iconic figures sharing the screen. James Garner opened up in a rare, candid interview, and what he shared showed just how much he respected Clint Walker and how complicated it could be working with someone who carried such a huge presence both on and off the screen. Garner said, "Clint was a remarkable guy. People always saw this huge, towering cowboy on screen, but when you met him off camera, he had a warmth and a humor that you just didn't expect. That surprise mix of strength and softness wasn't something folks talked about often, and Garner wanted people to know it." He explained that working with someone built like Walker took real balance, respect, teamwork, and a bit of your own solid sense of self. Garner put it straight. You always had to keep your wits about you. Clint had a presence that could fill a room, and you couldn't help but be aware of it. But he also made it clear that Walker wasn't using his size to intimidate anyone. In fact, it was the opposite. He was generous with his colleagues on set, Garner said. Walker always tried to bring everyone in, whether he was giving tips to someone new or cracking jokes to keep the crew awake during those long, draining days. Garner said that kind of behavior showed true professionalism, the kind that sticks with you long after the cameras stop rolling. But what really hit him were the personal moments, the kind that don't get written into scripts. He shared, "We shared some laughs, some tough days, and even some quiet ones. When you're filming in rough places, sometimes far from anything familiar, you build a bond fast because you have to trust each other just to get through the day." And that connection between them stayed with Garner long after the set was packed up. Clint had this smooth way of turning even the hardest shooting day into something easier to handle. His laugh was loud, real, and contagious, and Garner said that even though they didn't stay in each other's daily lives, he always knew that if he ever needed Clint, the man would show up without hesitation. Garner also talked about how people often got Clint completely wrong because of that larger-than-life image he carried on TV. A lot of folks thought Clint was intimidating or unapproachable, Garner explained. People assumed that the guy who could take down a whole pack of villains in a single Western episode had to be tough to deal with off camera. But as Garner pointed out, that idea was way off. Clint wasn't some cold, unwelcoming giant. He had a fast mind, smart humor, and a generosity streak that rarely made its way into magazine stories or headlines. Garner said, "That's why I've always felt it was important to tell the truth about him. He was a wonderful human being, and Hollywood sometimes forgets to mention that side of people." Garner didn't want the real Clint Walker to get lost behind the character people thought he was. Thinking about both their legacies, Garner felt proud to have worked alongside Clint and to have been part of the era they helped shake. Westerns ruled television back then, and Garner and Walker stood right in the middle of that golden moment in entertainment history. But for Garner, it wasn't just about the shows, the gunfights, or the action scenes. It was about the connections they built behind the camera. The respect, the loyalty, the laughs shared in dusty filming locations. That's what he held on to the most, and he said Clint embodied that whole spirit perfectly. Strong, talented, and still genuinely kind-hearted. Garner shared one last powerful reflection, revealing just how much he carried from that partnership. "Working with Clint taught me a lot about humility, patience, and the importance of being genuine. Those lessons stuck with him for life, long after the final scenes were shot." Garner wrapped up his thoughts by saying Clint Walker never felt the need to prove anything to anybody. He already knew exactly who he was, and that quiet confidence made everyone around him step up and shine brighter. Garner admired that deeply, and he said it was a lesson worth holding on to, especially in an industry that can sometimes forget what truly matters. To him, Clint wasn't just a star. He was a real, solid man, and Garner felt lucky to have crossed paths with him, even if their time working together was short. Through his own words, James Garner gave fans a heartfelt and layered look into a friendship built on respect, trust, and the kind of camaraderie that doesn't always show up on film. He pulled back the curtain and showed that behind the big action scenes and iconic characters were two professionals who shared experiences that stuck with them long after the cameras turned off. Garner reminded everyone that Clint Walker's talent was huge, but his humanity, that warmth, that humor, that kindness, was what made him unforgettable. It was a real tribute to the bonds forged under bright lights, rolling cameras, and the wild energy of a Hollywood era long gone. But Garner's own story didn't end there. The beloved actor, whose career stretched across more than 60 years and who charmed generation after generation with his wit, cool presence, and natural style, passed away peacefully at his home in Los Angeles on July 19, 2014. He was 86 years old, leaving behind a legacy that still hits deep in Hollywood and among fans worldwide. His passing closed out a legendary chapter, one that made people stop, think, and appreciate not just the star they watched on screen, but the man behind the roles. In his last years, Garner faced different health issues, including heart complications, but he stayed connected to the things he loved and remained close to his family, keeping his life steady and grounded. His final moments at home, surrounded by familiar comfort, reflected exactly who he had always been: dignified, private when he chose to be, but impactful in a way that never faded. Los Angeles, the city where he carved out his entire career, from the golden days of television to powerful film roles, served as the backdrop of his final chapter, showing just how closely he was tied to the entertainment world he helped shape. And even now, his influence continues to shine through the actors he inspired, the fans who still adore him, and the unforgettable stories he left behind. If you enjoyed this breakdown of James Garner's journey and his powerful reflections on Clint Walker, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment. Your support keeps this storytelling alive.